If you look back at why there is this objection to same-sex marriage, so much of it has to do with the differential roles of the sexes. If you go back in the history of marriage, it used to be that when a man married a woman, the woman became his property through the doctrine of what was known as coverture. And so she had no legal identity in her own right. She could not contract, she could not own property without the permission of her husband. And all of her earnings went directly to her husband. The only way in which we can understand a world in which same-sex marriage would even become an issue is if we have equality between the sexes. In other words, if you have a provider father and a homemaker mother, same-sex marriage makes no sense because two men would not be able to raise a child, two women would not be able to form an economically sustainable unit. So it's only with the liberation that feminism has given us that these issues are even on the table. The other side had a really ingenious rejoinder to this, which is to say both men and women are equally burdened. If you go back to the interracial marriage context, you see this happening in exactly the same way, where one side is saying, well, wait a minute, this is race discrimination because a white person can't marry a non-white person. And then the other side answers, this is the Loving versus Virginia case in 1967, well, there's equal application because both whites and non-whites are barred from marrying outside of their race. In that 1967 case, the court really pierces the veil and says, what's really going on here is white supremacy. This is all about maintaining the dominance of whites over non-whites. And so it really just shucks it down to the bone and says, this is what it's really about. So similarly, I argue in this book that if you carry that analogy forward, that women and men are not being equally burdened, when same-sex couples are prevented from marrying. If you just go down a couple of levels, you really see that the text is speaking to something more deep than that, something more fundamental about the subordination of the sexes and the sex stereotyping that we engage in when we think about what roles men and women should have in a marriage.